Shepherds watch their flocks by night, all seated on the ground.
Good morning, friends of the Loft. Hope you guys are doing awesome. Happy Advent week 2. We just finished and are moving into week 3. And I hope that you are taking time to slow and to wait and watch in the expectant arrival of Christ's birth. And so as we think about Advent, we are going to be doing a new series for the next couple weeks, kind of leading into Christmas, called Christmas Lights. And we hope that you will be able to join us. And thanks for everybody that was able to get away for a little Christmas celebration this week. And I think some of our groups are going to be doing that next week. So I hope that that is a sweet and special time for each group. And so today we just wanted to jump right in to this new Advent series. So as I was thinking about who was at Christ's birth and like what was important in those times, and the people that Jesus or God wanted around when Jesus was born, it kind of reminded me of a scene in The Crown. So I don't know who's been streaming different things during quarantine. Some of you may have been watching Schitt's Creek. Some of you may have been watching The Office before it goes away at the end of the year. So sad. But I have been watching The Crown. And it's kind of just the story of Queen Elizabeth in England. And so there's this scene where Princess Diana comes to the castle for the first, it's like before she's the princess, and she is hanging out with Prince Charles and getting to know him and like getting to know his family. And, you know, she walks in and it's like a really intimidating situation, and they want her to go like hunting with them. And your typical person doesn't really think the royal family likes to hunt, but they do. And so they're trying to get a stag, which I guess is like a buck or whatever. And so she felt like so out of place, but she just like jumps in and does it, even though it seemed really weird or like it wasn't her place. And then that night at dinner, she is like the life of the party and everybody loves her. And by the end of the night, everybody wants her to marry Prince Charles. And so when I was thinking about the story of Jesus coming, there were like some people that were invited to this situation that you wouldn't initially think. And they probably felt like, why did they even want me here? You know? But I think there's so many times in our lives where we're like, am I really supposed to be here? Or is this some kind of mistake? Maybe we didn't have like the level of money or influence or gifts that we think we should have to be invited at this certain place, but we get invited anyway. You know, maybe you go try out for a team and you don't think you're the best, but you make it. Or maybe you get asked to be in honors algebra 2 or whatever, and you're like, oh, I didn't really think I was smart enough for that class, but okay, that's cool. So I think we get invited to places maybe we feel like we don't belong, but God can show us that we can hang, or we are good enough, and He loves us anyway. So as we think about the people that were there, I think about the shepherds, first of all. So they were like, I mean, we aren't really around shepherds a lot in our life, are we? But they were it was kind of a lowly job. And so for thousands of years, the Israelites have been waiting on their Messiah, the promised one who was going to come and change everything. And the anticipation that had built up around that, everybody had ideas of how Jesus was going to come. And they thought he was going to come as a king in this powerful situation, and all these religious leaders would be there. But instead, well, it was just really different. So let's take a look at what that was. So we're going to look at Luke chapter 2 this morning, verses 8 through 10. If you want to open your Bible or your app on your phone, you're welcome to pause it until you get there. But this is what verse 8 says, Luke 2, verse 8. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all people." So next week we're going to jump more into the story. But for today, I want you to think about one thing. The first people invited to Jesus to see the King of the world, to know that Jesus was who they'd been waiting on, were the shepherds. So these shepherds, lowly, not a great job, but that's what made it so interesting. So it says the angel of the Lord appeared. Okay, so yeah, I get that seems super weird because that doesn't really happen to us today. But this angel shows up and announces to them the news of the Messiah. And he invites them to go see for themselves. And so I have no way of knowing what God was doing and why he chose them and why he let them be the first ones. But I do know that everything he does is on purpose. And I can't help but imagine that he was pointing out some kind of thing about mankind, some kind of thing about who we are as people. And he says, you're invited, even if you're a shepherd. You're invited to know about this guy, Jesus, and the life he wants us to have. So maybe if we feel like we're not as rich, or we're not as powerful, or we're not as popular, or we're not as athletic, or we're not as academic, but the shepherds, they weren't any of those things. They weren't any of the things that were expected, but God invited them, and he eventually invites everyone else to jump in on this story of who Jesus was and what he came to do and how he came to save us. And Jesus continues to show up in his life to people that seemed on the outside. From the woman caught in adultery to Zacchaeus, who we just talked about, totally on the outside, to the hemorrhaging woman, to the woman at the well. There's just story after story after story of Jesus going to people that don't seem like the ones that the King of the world would go to, but that's who he was going to. And he was inviting them into relationship with him. And Jesus says all that matters is that you're invited. You're invited to know me. You're invited to this story. You're invited to be part of this amazing piece of art that God is creating as his story for this world. So why do we care in the middle of this, in the middle of this Christmas season, this party season, whatever? Because you're invited. So there might be a party or a get-together that's smaller this year that you thought you might be included in on and you weren't. But God says you're always included in mine. You're always included in my party and you're always invited. And here at the Loft, we want that to be your experience too. That, you may not go to church here regularly. You're invited. You're always welcome here. You may have not come to small group all semester because of the pandemic and you're really nervous about maybe trying in January. You're invited. You may have not, stepped foot in the sanctuary during the pandemic, or even maybe turned on your computer to watch something like this or watch a service. We're telling you this morning, you are invited. That no amount of time, no amount of anything you could have done will keep you separated from God or keep you separated from our leaders loving on you here in the Loft. So no matter what you have felt from a time you might have walked in or a time you might have watched, we want you to know this walking out or leaving this video today, that you are invited and you belong. And Jesus says you belong. You are part of my story and I want to invite you into it. So go be a shepherd this week and invite somebody else in to know about this story of Christmas and what it's all about. So we thank you for joining us this morning. We hope that you have a blessed Advent, third week of Advent this week, and that you will join us again next week as we continue to talk about the light that came at Christmas. Thanks, guys.
This shall be the sign, the